Welcome to La Vida Las Vegas podcast. We're two physical therapists living the life in Las Vegas. I'm Dr. Erica.
And I'm Dr. Joe. We created this podcast for two reasons. First, to connect the healthcare, wellness, and fitness communities in Las Vegas. And second, to highlight all the amazing people we've met along the way.
Thank you for listening, and remember to take care of yourself.
Today's guest is Dr. J. She is a mental health professional that helps children, adolescents, and adults. She speaks about her journey to America and helping people with relationship struggles. Welcome to La Vida Las Vegas podcast. If you want to give yourself an introduction and tell us what you do.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Dasha Jandrusakova, Dr. J, and I'm clinical psychologist, currently licensed in the state of Nevada, as well as school psychologist, and I'm so pleased to be here with you guys.
Excellent. How did you get started on becoming a clinical psychologist?
It goes back way when I was in about my teen age. I've always wanted to help someone else. Initially wanted to be involved with the children, with the kids. So when I was in my teens, I was like running, volunteering at the child organizations called ERCO back in overseas in a small little country, used to be called Czechoslovakia, and then the country split into Czech and Slovakia. So I was in Slovakia doing a lot of volunteering, meeting with the kids, doing the summer camps, and I've always kind of wanted to continue doing something that would be helpful or enriching the lives of the children and also families and so on. So in Europe, I went to college, to school, to study biology and psychology first. After gaining my first official bachelor's and master's degree in biology and psychology, I decided to enrich and deepen my education and also get the special education into school psychology, and I worked as a school psychologist overseas in Slovakia for a few years until I decided to then move to the U.S. Mainly wanted to learn language. I was never really learning English back in school, nor them during the communism when I was growing up. The English was not really taught much. We were all kind of mandated, required to learn Russian. So English was not nothing that I learned back there. So when I came here, my all English was hello, hi, and how are you? That's all that I could say, and went through self-learning a lot over time. I also was excited to get to know the culture and just kind of new differences in here. And after a few years on East Coast first in New Jersey, New York area, I decided to go back to grad school and thought that serving or learning more about the families is something that I would wanted to do. And then I pursue a degree in marriage and family therapy. I was also very enthusiastic and learned a lot even back in Slovakia about the approach from Virginia Satir, which she was one of the very first female family therapists that started the family-oriented therapy, focusing mainly on the improving communication here on the West Coast in California. And she was, one of the very first female therapists who she's very well known for for the communication theory. So I was interested in learning more of that and got involved with the Satir Global Network, which used to be called Avanta back then, and wanted to focus on that during my MFT study. And then when I got my marriage and family therapy degree, I was working in New Jersey for a few years in the outpatient setting, as well as at the Family Reunification Center, working or helping families who somehow, was dealing with the custody of the children, dealing with the family-related issues. And after a while, I decided that I really kind of wanted to pursue my education even more and higher, and I applied to grad school again and to pursue my doctorate degree in clinical and school psychology. So I was like refreshing my memory from overseas about the school psychology, but also was very excited about learning something new about the clinical aspect of the psychology, and also integrating what I already knew about the families, about the systems, about the couples, about the children, and working and functioning in the families, for which the school psychology piece was very cool to somehow integrate all the child, adolescents, developmental psychology, the school psychology, as well as looking at it from the family systems. And then in 2015, I moved here to Las Vegas I was actually matched for my pre-doctorate internship or residency to complete my clinical hours to become the fully licensed clinical psychologist in here, which I completed, and that's how I got in here.
So many questions after that. So how many languages do you speak?
Very good question. Yeah, so my native original first language is a Slovak language, which is very similar to Czech language. So I'm also proficient in Czech language. And because I was born and raised in very close to the borders of the Poland, I do understand Polish as well, although my expressive communication it's a little bit more limited. In a school, we had to learn Russian, so I have some basics of the Russian, and my other language that I learned in school is French. So French is my the language of my heart. I really love, and I was actually more proficient in French before I came here than in English, and a little tiny bits of the German, although that would have to be really, really refreshed and brushed up, and of course English as a language. So a few.
That's
and
six.
Yeah, which is pretty cool that I can actually do the therapy or do the clinical work fairly proficiently in definitely Slovak, Czech, and English language as well. But I do see the patients who are Polish speaking or who speak Russians as well.
What was the hardest language to learn?
Well, I think English was pretty hard, especially at the very initial beginning. Like, I remember the time when I moved here, and I was coming from the point I worked as a psychologist over there in overseas, basically using language on a daily basis, communicating, talking, listening, and so. And then I remember that time when I came here and I could not really express much myself. I was looking for the words, could not really talk very well. So it was quite frustrating initially, but it took some period of time when I felt more comfortable. And within a few months, more proficient, all the way up to a few years later when I was required before getting to grad school to take the GRE exam, which really used a lot of, higher level scientific kind of English, which was another challenge for me to master. But it's fun to learn something new. My lifelong motto, it's from Virginia Satir, saying we can learn something new anytime we believe we can. And if we have that motivation, if we have that belief to do something, to learn something, we certainly can.
So what was it like growing up in Slovakia?
It was quite different back in those days or in those times, mainly because it was in 70s, 80s, during the communism. The things were quite restricted and working out a little bit differently than in here. But aside of that, I think I was lucky enough to have a very strong, good family support upbringing, growing up in a full, intact family of mom, dad, and I have one sibling. And, knowing that kind of background, knowing that no matter what, even now, all my family is over there, that I am here. I still have that support, and we talk regularly, especially with my mom. I'm so close to that. It's really very very good. It's almost like therapeutic, to get if you imagine that. One day I moved here not knowing anyone at all, not even speaking the foreign language, and just kind of need to go on. And back in that was in 1999, 2000, the phones, the smartphones were not there out yet. So I remember around time I found some kind of like a free fax. So we were like talking over the fax. I was faxing my weekly kind of update to my mom, and she was getting it at work, and it was kind of interesting. Now the FaceTime and all the Skype, and so it's on. So it's really good that technology is kind of helping to connecting.
So you would write her letters and then fax it to her?
I would, on the computer, I would type, the letters. I would type her about, how was I doing in here. And there was some kind of portal or link that allowed to send that as a fax. So she would actually get it, old-fashioned, would come out from the fax machine, my letters to her. And then I don't remember how was she responding. I think, and back then there was not even emails were not really working well. So that was pretty cool.
So at what point did you decide you wanted to come to the U.S., and how did you do that? It's if you came here by yourself, right?
Yeah. So I was right out of the college working as a school psychologist there. In Slovakia, I actually returned back to my hometown and was living with my family. The job that I had was for a school district. It was pretty much kind of the walking distance. It took me 5 minutes to walk to get to work. And back in those days, we really didn't have like a cars or anything to use. So I was fairly young, straight from out of the college, and worked as a school psych for about 2 years and started to get into that kind of routine of being home, going to work, returning back home, next day again, and the same routine all over and over. And I kind of just felt like, I'm young. I don't just want to get into the pattern of, work and home. And so I was not really much attached. I was single. I did not have really much of the attachment. And I kind of wanted to really explore and find something something new. I wanted to learn like English because at that time it was after the communism. English was started to be very popular. A lot of opportunities over there were for those who speak English. So I thought, let me explore. And it was just, I remember I was on on a bus, and I pick up some kind of brochure or advertisement, was reading, and on the back of it, there is this kind of thing of, oh, come and explore, come to America. And it was initially the student exchange or, young exchange program, more of the au pair program. So I was like, well, this is the opportunity. Why not? I apply, sign up. I got selected. I got picked and got sent to that family in New Jersey.
Okay.
And that was, pretty cool.
So with the au pair program, tell us more about what that entailed.
Well, I had an opportunity to live with American family. So for me, it was like a pretty exciting. Oh my goodness, America back there in Europe was, there is something new. After communism's doors open, now we can freely come and visit, because before that, we basically could not. It was very hard to get through the borders, and so it was very exciting that I got to live in a family. I got to know a little bit how the actual American families are kind of, get to know a little bit more into, the closed door of the structure of the one single the family. So it was the eye-opening. It was also an opportunity for me to get to know the culture, improve my language skills, learn the language, and take care of the children. At that time, there were two kids, a girl 5 years old at that time, and the boy 7-year-old. So for me, it was a very exciting opportunity. What I was doing back in Slovakia, in Europe, and then coming here and learning. And actually, that girl, she had some learning difficulties, and she was in special education for a little bit. So that was very very exciting. But I do have to admit, especially in the beginning, quite challenging with the language barrier. Adjustment of the status back there. I was, well established, respected psychologist there, and then I came here, and I was like starting from the scratch to be more of the au pair, the helper in the family. So it was challenging, but I look at the challenges as the opportunities to learn, to grow, and to become enriched.
So how old were you when you came to America?
I was 26.
Okay. So when you first got here, what were some of the biggest differences in culture that you noticed?
Well, it was obviously the language. I did not really understand much what was going on, what's happening. It was the way how the families were functioning. The technology was, back in those days, we didn't even have cell phones over there, cars or anything. And then I came here, and the family gave me my own car for driving the kids around, and I was like, wow, I've never even we didn't even have car in my first original kind of families, and it was like, wow. And then they gave me the cell phone. I was like, oh my goodness, cell phone just for myself. This is so cool. So it was really kind of opening and quite exciting to learn the things. And then I had a lot of opportunity also to explore more fuller the country, and I was traveling a lot, pretty much all over East Coast, West Coast. during that time when I was in New Jersey, I came to Las Vegas also. That was my first time as pretty much a tourist going down the Las Vegas Boulevard Strip and so on, exploring all the national parks all around. Very cool trip. And I would say the most adventurous trip of my life was the trip to Alaska. Remembering backpacking overnight and just kind of wildlife and all the animals, bears everywhere, and so it was pretty cool. And I would say the prettiest trip was probably in Hawaii. Really admiring the beautiful nature and pristine beaches and so on. So a lot of traveling that was also very exciting part.
How about food? What was your favorite food when you came here? Something you hadn't had before?
Well, that was a whole big different thing as far as the food. In Slovakia back in those days, now I think they're opening way more, but the things like Chinese was really Chinese to me. I tried it for the first time and I was like, this is interesting. We would never eat like a meat, like a chicken in like on a sweet size. So that first I was like, like sweet, it's always like a dessert kind of thing. And now they eat it like with the chicken with the orange sauce or so. So that was quite interesting. And then I started to experiment with the Japanese, the sushi, like eating the raw fish. And the first was like strange, but then I really quickly started to enjoy it, and I love sushi. I never really become a big fan of what's considered like typical American, like the hamburgers and all that. Although on occasion when we socialize, do the barbecue or so, it's kind of fun to have. And because I was living for a while with someone who was very much into nutrition, and so that helped me also explore the very healthy lifestyle. Before I came here, and I think it's more of the stereotype that was presented to us in Europe, that all Americans or most Americans eat unhealthy, and then there is this overweight and all kind of that. But
there might be some truth to that.
I think there's a lot of truth to it, actually, but go on.
But it was, for me, the eye-opening that the family I was living with were eating very healthy, like the salads regularly. Even the kids in a family would eat healthy, would eat veggies, would eat salads, which was very interesting to even know that. And I learned a lot from that family, and a lot of like those stereotypes that I had kind of changed. We cannot really put everyone into same spot, and there are variations as well.
What's something that you can't get here in the United States that you had maybe growing up, like that's nostalgic for you, like food or like something that you can only get?
So I was looking when I moved to Las Vegas first. I was looking for some Slovakian stores or place that I could get the ingredients for if I would be like a cooking Slovakian dish or something. And I just, it was hard. When I was on East Coast in New York, New Jersey, there were a few Slovak or Czech restaurants to go and get our traditional Slovakian food. But I could not really find much of that in here in Vegas. So I was kind of missing. I found one store which is more of like on the Russian, Ukraine kind of side where I can get some products, but not so much in here. Hopefully it will change in the short future.
What's a classic dish that you would cook, if like a traditional Slovakian food? What would be the name of it, or like what type of food? Or
one of the traditional Slovakian dish, it's called brinzové halušky, which is like like a pasta or made from the flour and potato dough, like a gnocchi kind of thing, made with goat cheese called brinza. So the brinza, the halushki, it's from that, and it's sprinkled with a little bacon and chives, and it's delicious. Once I find, or there are some alternatives to that cheese called brinza. I really enjoy cooking that and making that as a meal.
So, what brought you to Las Vegas if you lived on the East Coast first?
So it was my pre-doctorate internship or residency here. I needed to complete a few thousand hours in order for me to get a doctorate in clinical psychology. So basically, last year in grad school was full-time working to doing the internship, and basically gaining the supervised experience to be able one day to become the clinical psychologist. So I was working at the place called Desert Psychological, doing a lot of partially forensic work, doing the assessment evaluation for the court-ordered cases who needed to get through either therapy or get evaluation, get assessment in order for them to get where they needed to be. So I did some reunification cases. I also did assessment for disabilities. When people apply for disability through Social Security, they needed to be evaluated, to see if there is or what mental conditions are there, if they are affecting their functioning. We also work partially with the VA to do the assessment for the veterans, whether they are still suffering from PTSD, to get their benefits through that. And then also I did some therapy. We worked with, had a contract with Child Protective Services, and if the kids, students needed to be evaluated for like special education or get the second opinion about the child was suspected to be in a special education, but could not get that evaluation through school, or wanted to get the second opinion for the special education, then we would evaluate. And that's actually my kind of specialty that I continue doing and working on in within the field of the school psychology, to very much evaluate for special education. Sometimes the kids or the parents suspect some conditions such as ADHD or dyslexia, specific learning disorder, dyscalculia, dysgraphia. The kids are really struggling and just cannot really progress well. So there is a lot of kind of different cool things that we can look into with the assessment, and look or do the intellectual functioning, do the IQ test, achievement functioning, and see if there is any discrepancy, if there is what is it that is contributing towards those challenges and difficulties in school. And so that way the kids can get additional help in school, and also the parents can get some kind of suggestion, recommendation based on the areas that the child is whether weak or what are the strengths. What could they do as a parents to help the child to be successful. And then I also do I also do the therapy piece for some conditions like ADHD. Some parents just don't feel fully comfortable with going fully in within the medical kind of round, having medications. So then the mindfulness specifically have been proven very effective for focusing attention and so on. So that's what I use in my therapeutic approach. And then another, in my work with adults, I use a lot of what's called ACT, or acceptance and commitment therapy, which is based on mindfulness, being in a moment, being present, and which is, approach also across for the ADHD. Basically, what you kind of want to do is being fully in a moment, being present, being there, so you can function to your potentials as well. And I also do a lot of couples and family therapy. And with the couples, I use a lot of from a combination of Virginia Satir, improving the communications. A lot of time, couples at some point, just kind of when the things are going down, it's due lack of communication or unhealthy type of communication. So working a lot on improving communication, as well as using John Gottman's style, kind of helping to understanding more, as well as Sue Johnson is very good with the emotional focus therapy, where we really kind of take it down, especially the communication, more at the emotional level as opposed to unhealthy criticism or unhealthy blame or so on. With couples happens a lot of time to the point when they seek the help.
So what are your feelings on ADHD? Some people say that that's a little bit often misdiagnosed, or that kids are just trying to be kids, or it might be a product of not being able to move around enough. Kind of like when you have a puppy in a cage all day and then you let it out and it runs around and tears up the house. It's not that the dog is bad. The dog just has all this extra energy. What are your thoughts on that?
And it is true, ADHD became so overdiagnosed in here in the US, especially over the past, few years. A lot of time, it's just kind of, the kids is not, it's active, and the first thing it's ADHD. Also in a school where I do work. A lot of time when there are the behavioral problems, the first thing is, the ADHD or so on. So it is very hard, especially in school settings, for someone to just, because someone has a little, and it's kind of also hard to even to catch it, or so hard to kind of distinguish what's still natural. Like I was having a 5 going on 6-year-old child in my assessment sessions, and it's like so hard to even see what is still like developmentally appropriate. The kids who is 6 years old, obviously cannot really sit still for more than a few minutes. And if the child is kind of all around and getting and cannot really do the work assignment or read or write for more than 6 minutes and kind of stands up and move around, is it because the ADHD, or is it because just kind of very naturally still developing and still normally cannot really do that? So it is true that it can be over labeled, and at the same time, I do kind of think that pretty much kind of having the ADHD checked by a professional, by a psychologist or neuropsychologist, checking into all different kind of ways or venues. One of the conditions or one of the requirements for the ADHD diagnosis to have in the current DSM-5 manual is that these conditions needs to be presented at least in 2 settings. So sometimes we do have a case when the child seems to be all around at home, right? Hard to handle at home. But in school, it's, no one really kind of sees that, that much difference when he is or she is with other kids in a more structured kind of environment. It's functioning much better. So then we would not really we would look into maybe impact of the environment, or implementing more of the structure organization in that setting when when that is more present. But as I said, a lot of them I see in my practice. In some cases, adding medication, it's helping. I see a lot of families who are really kind of saying if he just does not get that medication, when is he on or not on, it's like a day and night. It's such a big kind of difference. But also, there are the alternative approaches. And as I said, the mindfulness therapy, helping with organizational skills can be equally helpful. And that's kind of also similar when talking about a medication with, in cases, for the adult with the mood disorders, the depression and anxiety. There are also a lot of studies out there, especially, a lot of time adult patients are kind of asking whether the medication, and there was a time similarly to, talking about the ADHD back in 90s, where overprescribing the medications for depressions, the time of Zoloft for everything, SSRIs going on. There are studies out there kind of saying that the therapy can be as effective for treatment of the mood and depression as the medication. But it really kind of depends on the intensity of the depression. So the studies were saying moderate to severe depression, the medication, and the most severe, the medication would be probably the most effective, to the point if someone is so depressed that is highly suicidal and cannot even get out of the bed, then definitely medication would be a combination of medication and psychotherapy. It's very effective for the moderate level of depression. And with the mild depression, the talk therapy, psychotherapy, it's as effective as the medication. So medication tends to be more of, patch up, short-term kind of thing. Some medications can have the addictive kind of aspect to it, and once the medication is off, the problems might get to the same level, versus in psychotherapy, when we work together, it might have more of the long-term good effect.
So Dr. J, how can people work with you, and what's the kind of the process to get started if they want to get some help?
Sure, that's a really good question. So, the main initial kind of first step is just to pretty much kind of reach out to me. I can be reached via the phone, email, and I also have the Psychology Today profile. If anyone just Google my name, Dr. Dasha Jendrusakova, it will kind of pop in there, but I believe the link will be somehow posted next to the podcast. That my name is quite complicated. That's why I go with Dr. J. But if you just type to Google DASA, Dasha, my last name Jendrusakova, JENDRUSAKOVA, it will pretty much pop up in there, and you can read more about what I do at the Psychology Today profile, and follow the link in there. You can schedule a brief 15 minutes free consultation where we can kind of talk a little bit more, get to know to each other, and figure out whether we are a good fit to continue working based on what the patient's or client's needs is, and then we will take it from there. So the Psychology Today has all of my information, including a brief video, the pictures of me, and briefly about what I do. Mainly a lot of psychoeducational assessment in there, but also therapy for children, adolescents, parents, but I also do the adults therapy.
So when you go through, you're working with, quite the age range with that. You have to go in through like kind of child development, and that's just, for me, it's like when I think about working with children, I have to think about so many different milestones and like things that they're dealing with. how do you transition that with, as you're working with your clients, like what's going on in your head in terms of people's age ranges and things like that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And it is true. It requires for me to really practice myself the mindfulness. What I do in therapy, what I ask the clients to do, being in the moment, being present. And if right now I am working with a 5-6 years old child, at the moment, I am there, I am at their level, I am present, I am really kind of using the language that they do. I literally even go down to their eye level and be in the shoes, be really there. And it kind of happens even happened in the past a few times when I work with the little ones, and then next session is with the older, really kind of switch and get into 16 years old and really refocus myself. Now I am not, I am talking with the adolescents. So it happened in the past that, I got a little look, why are you talking to me like like that? But I think it's really important, even, for me as a professional to take a really self-care, and even like in between the sessions, really redirect, refocused, take that break. And even outside of the services that I provide, have some kind of avenue, do something that is completely unrelated to the work. Like my biggest hobby is playing volleyball, and that's how we actually met with you guys. And it's it's a therapy itself, kind of to do something completely unrelated. Let the mind kind of wander, not kind of think about the problems of others, about everything else that's happening, and being in the moment and doing something totally different.
So what's something that you commonly see in your practice, but you wish more people knew it?
What I commonly see and they don't. Well, there's another piece of my work that I do. I also work with the seniors and elder population, and I also do a lot of research. So I am developing constantly new tests, new things related. So last year, I've been involved in a big project of developing the new test, new scale for dyslexia, also updating the new test for ADHD. This year, we are updating the new scale for anxiety in children and looking at impact of COVID and anxiety in children. And that's a really kind of great opportunity also for general population to just kind of have an experience. Or we were re-evaluating the whole very well-known IQ test. So if someone would wanted to just kind of get an experience, what is it like to take the IQ test? It's actually because it's the research, it's a paid opportunity, the volunteering, taking the test, like the IQ test, will actually be something that the person can be reimbursed for, can be paid small fee for the time and so on. You will not get results. I will not be able to tell you what your IQ in this case is, but it might be a good opportunity for someone even to try on, what is it like to take the whole IQ test and get paid for that, a small fee for the time. So that's something that it's out there.
And then what's something you've learned and wish you knew sooner?
I'll say it again.
What's something you've learned and you wish you knew sooner?
Yes. So one thing that I kind of wanted to maybe talk a little bit about that for those parents who are kind of on a fence, thinking about whether they should have their kids evaluated for special education or ADHD and so on, and just kind of are undecided. One thing that kind of I learned the super hard way was that when I was growing up, the special education was not a big deal. It was always like linked to someone who is like really, really doing really bad in school, and getting the special ed would be something terrible. Something like really for those who are really, really low and not doing well, so they could kind of get a help. So I was always kind of knew that something was going on with me, because I was always really, very hard worker, focused. But sometimes I would do a little thing like reverse the numbers or letters or the things that I kind of thought might be linked or related to maybe, one of the maybe dyslexia or so on, the reversal of so, but I've never really had that checked into, and never really kind of know. As I was going through all my studies, I kind of suspect something, and then I also have a lot of like dealing with anxiety, and especially the test anxieties or so on. Never really kind of got it checked until later on in my life, after I completed all the education and so on, when I kind of had to go and get that final step to take the big kind of test to fully become a licensed psychologist. I kind of realized how my condition, and especially the test anxiety, was really interfering and delaying my ability to kind of to take that exam. And would I be tested in a pass? Would I have that formal condition or diagnosis? I know that in the future, when I was taking that test, I could get accommodations and I could suffer less and can have maybe the extra time or things on, when I needed to take that test. So, for those who kind of considering, is it good to have their child to be checked into, my lesson learned would be, would that be checked early enough? A lot of health could kind of happen earlier in a life, and especially when the parents when you see as your child is really struggling and suffering, have it checked earlier would be something really, really good, important.
Very good. Well, we appreciate you being on our show. And we will go ahead and put all your information in the show notes. So anyone that's watching wants to get in contact with you, they'll have all your information. And thanks again for being on the show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Pleasure on my side.
We'd like to thank you for listening to La Vida Las Vegas podcast. We hope you enjoyed the time with our guests as much as we did. It would help us out so much if you could share, subscribe, or review our podcast, or any combination of the three. Thanks again, and remember to take care of yourself.